Worm is a web serial by author John C. Wildbow McCrae. Chapters were published twice weekly from June 2011 until completion in November 2013. It's a story about a teenage girl and her budding life as a superhero, and it's probably the best superhero story you've never heard of. In this video, I'll be giving a very broad overview of the story premise, main character, and my overall thoughts about Worm. I will not be discussing any major plot points. I'm not a professional writer or reviewer. I am kind of a sci-fi geek at heart. However, I'm definitely a normie when it comes to discussing the superhero genre. What follows are just my first impressions of Worm. You're certainly welcome to agree or disagree with my opinions. And with that disclaimer out of the way, let's get going. I went into Worm with absolutely no idea what to expect. The story drew me in pretty quickly. Worm is dark and gritty. There's a fairly high level of violence in this story. It's not gratuitous, but it's there, and at times it's pretty intense. Wildbow himself makes it clear that Worm, quote, isn't a story for the sensitive or the young, end quote. Now the following is from Wildbow's website, parahumans.wordpress.com, and it reads, quote, an introverted teenage girl with an unconventional superpower, Taylor goes out in costume to find escape from a deeply unhappy and frustrated civilian life. Her first attempt at taking down a supervillain sees her mistaken for one, thrusting her into the midst of the local Cape scene's politics, unwritten rules, and ambiguous morals. As she risks life and limb, Taylor faces the dilemma of having to do the wrong things for all the right reasons, end quote. Now, people with superpowers in Worm are called parahumans, or more commonly referred to as capes. For the most part, capes fall into two categories, hero or villain, and as you might expect, most capes around the world organize themselves into teams. This goes for both heroes and villains. I think Taylor is a great protagonist. She's a fully developed and likable character. Over the course of the story, we come to care about her. We get frustrated with her on more than one occasion. Indeed, there are several times I thought, just what the heck are you doing, Taylor? That's because the story did a fine job getting me invested enough to ask the question. Taylor is certainly no Mary Sue. All her victories are earned. Many of them are paid for in blood, her own or that of those close to her. She has a very believable hero's journey. Over time, we see her struggle and grow in her life as a civilian and as a cape. She does make mistakes, and her mistakes have genuine consequences. As Taylor navigates the line between heroics and villainy, she is faced with countless challenges. She has to make difficult decisions, many that call into question her morals and judgment. Battles between heroes and villains are, in a word, fantastic. Wildbow really knows how to paint an image with words. He introduces us to dozens and dozens of important capes throughout the story, each with some unique superpowers. Wildbow has constructed a world, and each cape, whether villain or hero, operates believably in that world. The guy has a near bottomless well of creativity when it comes to creating capes and giving them their powers. I also really like how he has capes use their powers in combinations during fights. It's some very cool stuff indeed. But the story is much more than superpowered beings pounding the crap out of each other. We get a deep look at Taylor's life at home and at school. There's the politics between heroes and villains. Sometimes the two sides are forced to put aside animosities as they deal with even larger threats. And there's a shadowy organization working behind the scenes for their own agenda. The side characters are so well done. This is another area where I think Worm absolutely shines. Several side characters take remarkable personal journeys. They have lots of personal growth during the story. We get to know and spend quality time with them. The loss of some side characters come as a kick in the gut, just as the achievements of others make you want to cheer. Identity politics seems to be kept to a minimum in Worm. For example, there's a point in the story where it seems like 75% of the characters leading the way are female, and you don't even realize it's happened. There is no artificial, cringeworthy girl power moment a la Avengers Endgame. There doesn't have to be. The story just evolves there naturally. You're so caught up in the action that you don't think about it. You're too busy assessing the team's firepower and hoping they can get out alive. It's fantastic, and I'm here for it. Some of these women and girls are incredibly heroic, some are brutally dangerous, and a couple are incredibly frightening. Whether hero or villain, none of them elevate themselves by denigrating a male counterpart. Again, they don't have to. Worm was completed in 2013. It is therefore free of politics and, quote, messaging that is so pervasive in almost all entertainment today. It does not beat you over the head with themes of diversity and inclusion or class warfare. That's not to say that those things are not addressed. It's just that they are so well handled they don't feel forced. It's organic. The characters are just who they are. All credit to Wildbow for this. The story is clearly the thing here, and social issues do not detract from that. So here's the bad news. Because there's no overt messaging, I therefore believe Worm will never be made into a TV series. At least not anything close to the source material. Not in current year Hollywood. And that's just a crime. This is such a good story, and it deserves to be exposed to a wider audience. Among my personal pantheon of great fictional female characters are Ellen Ripley, Sarah Connor, Dagny Taggart, and Christian Avasarala. To that list I'm adding Taylor Hebert. She's a character I cheered for, I feared for, and at times had pity for. Taylor is intelligent and resourceful. She has depth, a level of maturity, and some insecurity. There are times that her teen angst does show through, and it works in the story. It makes her whole and believable. As I said early on, this was only meant to be an overview of Worm. Others have done proper, detailed reviews. My personal favorite were the podcast reviews done by the guys at Doof Media. That's Doof, D-O-O-F, Media. They did an arc-by-arc breakdown of the story. Their We've Got Worm podcast makes a great companion piece as you go through Worm. If Netflix, Amazon, or HBO for that matter had a lick of sense, they would do the following. Step 1. Give Wildbow a hefty sum for the story. Step 2. Get them with a no-nonsense director, production team, and a good budget. Step 3. Tell them to make a story as close to the source material as is feasible for TV production, either live action or animation. Step 4. Get out of their way and prepare to rake in boatloads of cash. Personally, I think Worm is a Game of Thrones level success story waiting to happen. It's a long story. Based on the story timeline and the age of the characters, I'm guessing you could get, say, 4 to 5 12-episode seasons out of it. From what I've seen, there's a pretty active fandom around Worm waiting to be tapped. Today's Hollywood is mired in a morass of remakes and reimaginings and sequels and prequels, seemingly bereft of new ideas. Meanwhile, gems like Worm sit untapped, waiting for someone with some courage to bring it to life. But at least you don't have to wait. Go check out Worm today.